Hey gang, it's Kelvin from the Real Mensters. Before we get started today, I just wanted to talk to you about what our schedule is looking like. So moving forward, what we're trying to do is have 3 videos a week. So Mondays should be deck profiles like this one. I realize that this is not coming out on a Monday, but that's because we're trying to get the cycle back. From there, we're going to have gameplay videos for the profile deck from Monday on Wednesdays. And finally, on Fridays, we're going to do a sort of wild card video, just whatever it is that I feel like making. Maybe a discussion, maybe something experimental, maybe like product opening. We're just going to see where it takes us. And so that's what the schedule's looking like moving forward. So just keep an eye out, and you should see regular content coming out Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. As far as the time is concerned, it's going to depend on my work schedule. But with that being said, let's talk about what we're really here to talk about today, and that's this deck. So today's deck is going to be a Matt Ishida and Gabumon deck, which you probably could tell from the thumbnail, and also probably unsurprising based on this playmat and this deck box, it is going to be a purple deck, not a blue deck. And the reason for that is because blue is sort of the meta for Gabumon right now. I don't really think it's super interesting to just put a meta deck here and call it a challenge deck. So I decided to go with purple, which doesn't really see a lot of play using the Gabumon line in this meta. So I thought it would be a lot more interesting, and it's actually a pretty cool deck. So with that in mind, let's jump right into Matt Ishida's Digi-Destiny. Alright, so as with last time, we're going to go ahead and start with the Tamers first, because this is all about the Tamers and their Digimon. So we're playing 2 copies of the purple Matt Ishida, the Memory Tamer. Well, the effect to pick up a card from the trash is really nice. We're really playing him because we want to start our turns with at least 3 memory, and we'll see why later. So that's why he's at 2. Next up are our options. We have 1 copy of Heat Viper. Again, this is a standard card in purple. We just like it a lot more in this deck because we have a lot of targets to use it with, and we'll see that later. And finally, 3 copies of Trump Sword. Again, super standard for purple. Almost every purple deck is running this at 3, and so are we. So with all of those in mind, let's go ahead and move on to our eggs. So this is actually a little different from usual. We're only running 1 copy of Pagumon. The reason for that is because we don't really care too much about trashing the top card of the deck. We're just putting it in here because we want to have our 5th purple egg, but it's really not necessary, so he's only at 1. Instead, we're running 4 copies of Yamon, and you'll notice that there's no Gabumon line Digimon in here, and that's because purple doesn't have anything from the Gabumon line at level 2, which, if you recall the rules, that's fine. We're just going for stuff that's available. Anyway, with that said, Yamon is very nice for this deck because he gives plus 1000 DP if there are 5 or more cards in the trash. It's not that hard to get cards in the trash even when you're not playing stuff like Pagumon, just because this deck likes to have stuff die, so you get a lot of trash And this is going to really help us later in the game so that our high-end Digimon are less likely to die when they're attacking aggressively. So that's why that's at 4. So next up, we're going to be looking at the level 3s. And to start off, we're going to look at 4 copies of Demi-Devimon. Normally, in purple, you don't see as many copies of Demi-Devimon because there are so many good effect Digimon. But in this deck specifically, we like the 2-cost rookie because it facilitates other plays where we want to sacrifice one of our own Digimon. So it's actually really useful to keep him around in the hand. So we're going to hang on to him and only use him when we need to make those plays or when we have nothing else. In addition, we've got 4 copies of Tamers. Again, the Tamers is a bit of a special case. Normally in purple, he's run at like 2-3 copies, but in this deck, we find ourselves sacrificing more, and so we want to be able to get that little bit of extra draw power by sacrificing him. And so, we run him at 4. Next is going to be Matt's partner, Gabumon, which is also run at 4. So, the inheritable effect on this is pretty good. Draw 2, discard 1, and pretty much every purple deck is running it at 4. But honestly, we're not sacrificing our level 4s and higher in this deck as much, so it's not as useful. But even so, we keep him just in case his effect does go off. And finally, to round off our rookies, we are running 2 copies of Tsukaimon. The reason we're not running Impmon in this deck is because, again, we're not as worried about loading up our trash. And even though I just said we're not letting our level 4s die as much, even so, just having Tsukaimon under one of your higher level Digimon, because you do evolve more in this deck, is really nice because it's a way to sort of make your opponent think twice about killing your line before you can get it to where you want it to be, because then they're going to give you memory. So next up is going to be the level 4s, and we have 4 copies of Vilemon. Really self-explanatory. You gotta run 4 blockers in almost every deck. That's why we're running 4 copies. And then we have 4 copies of Devimon. Again, this is really standard in most purple decks. It's just a really great piece of removal, so you almost always want to run him at 4. And lastly, we have something that is interesting, and that's going to be 3 copies of Garurumon. Again, this is Matt's partner Digimon, the evolution of Gabumon, and the reason that we're running him at 3 is because we actually are deleting a lot of our own Digimon, so we'll get this effect for Garurumon on your turn, once per turn. When one of your other Digimon is deleted, you gain 1 memory. So we're going to be able to resolve this inheritable a lot, and combined with times when we destroy something with Tsukaimon under it, we're going to be able to get a whole lot of memory. So first up, on level 5s, we have 2 copies of Myotismon. Myotismon, honestly, didn't come in handy too often with this deck, so I could totally see dropping him or considering replacing him with something else later on down the line. But for right now, I think 2 is a decent amount, just because it's a very memory efficient way to try to get into your megas. The big issue is going to be that there's a specific level 5 we really want to see under our main mega, and Myotismon just isn't it. That being said, we're also running 4 copies of Chimeramon, which is, again, very standard in every purple deck. Every purple deck is running this at 4. But, again, this deck in particular is discarding more of its own Digimon, so it's a lot easier to resolve Chimeramon without feeling like you're giving up too much. And finally, this is that other level 5 that we really want to see, and that is Garurumon. Once more, this is Matt's partner Digimon, and he is going to facilitate really insane plays because he can discard one of your Digimon to unsuspend the Digimon when attacking, when he is a Digivolution source. So that's really going to help with our main Digimon in terms of attacking a bunch of times and dealing a ton of damage and just completely pressing the opponent. And so, with that out of the way, we're going to move on to level 6. And first for level 6, we've got 3 copies of Piedmon. Again, I keep saying this, but really standard. You really like Piedmon because he can save you when you're in a pickle by bringing back some blockers or some Devimons or whatever the case may be. But he's super awesome, so we're not going to talk about him too much more. Just you want to see him a lot. That's why he's at 3. And then lastly for level 6s, we have 4 copies of Metal Garurumon. Again, this is Matt's partner, and this is the final form of his partner. And so this thing is actually really nuts, especially with Garurumon under it. His effect is when he's attacking, you can play a level 3 purple Digimon from your trash, and its on-play effect doesn't activate. So if you swing with Garurumon under this thing, you can attack, bring back a level 3 Digimon, destroy it with the effect of Garurumon, unsuspend him, and then attack a second time, bring back another level 3. This starts to get really nuts when you use stuff like Tamers, or if you already have a level 3 in play, because you can attack, destroy your level 3 with Garurumon, then resolve Metal Garurumon to bring that back, and then when he unsuspends, attack again, bring back another level 3. And then if you really want to, follow that up with a Chimeramon to kill one of those level 3s you brought back and kill one of your opponent's Digimon, or a Heat Viper and kill 2 Digimon. And it's just really crazy how much control this gives you. On top of that, having Yamon underneath that whole stack can make it so that suddenly Metal Garurumon is swinging in for 12k. He's a lot safer than at 11k. At 11k, he dies against a lot of Digimon. At 12k, it's just Omnimon and whatever. If the opponent is playing Plesiomon or Phoenixmon or possibly Millenniummon, then he can die there. But other than that, there's really nothing he dies to, so it's pretty safe. And lastly, we'll go ahead and talk about our level 7s. There's only 2, and it's the 2 everyone expects. Millenniummon, because purple has no other level 7s in the 1.0 format. That being said, yes, 2 copies of Millenniummon, super standard in purple, but I want to talk about why it's super good in this deck. And that's because you swing with your Metal Garurumon twice, you leave him suspended, he's 11,000. Now your opponent has the option to try to swing into him next turn if they can get another Digimon on board with 11,000 or more DP. And so you lose this big chain of Digimon you built up. You don't want that to happen. And so because you don't want that to happen, you evolve into Millenniummon, remove one of their threats so that they can't attack you, and two, if they do manage to attack you, then it doesn't matter because Millenniummon is just going to come back onto the board, and he might even get off an effect like Tsukaimon's to gain some memory. But also, if you'll remember, we're not playing Impmon, we're not playing Pagumon in high numbers, so we're not actually discarding a lot from our deck, because one downside to Millenniummon is when he gets discarded, he can't be recovered by the effect of Matt, this guy, because he's not a purple card. But since we're actually just filtering through our deck by evolving and draw effects, there's never a point where we're really discarding Millenniummon through effects other than intentionally doing so after using Gabumon's effect. So we don't have to worry about accidentally losing him, which means we see him a lot even though he's only at 2 copies. And so that's pretty much the whole deck. Honestly, I was kind of surprised by how good this deck is. I'm not saying it's a top tier deck by any stretch, but it really is insane how much you can do with the Metal Garurumon Were Garurumon combo, and it's not even that hard to get off. You just have to sort of be careful and build up your chain in the breeding area if you can. And with Matt, it's not that hard, because if you start with a level 4 in the breeding area, you can go into Were Garurumon and then Metal Garurumon in the same turn, and since Metal Garurumon doesn't have an on-Digivolve effect, you don't care that he's still in here rather than out here. Alternatively, if you start your turn with Matt and you just hatch, you can go into a rookie for free, go into Garurumon or some other level 4 for 2, and then go into Were Garurumon for 3, leaving your opponent at 2, and it means the next time your turn rolls around, you're definitely going to be able to bring out the Were Garurumon, go into the Metal Garurumon, swing on your opponent twice, and if you need to, drop that Millenniummon. So overall, it's just a nuts combo. It's kind of a nuts deck, and I think it's a bit slept on. And if you are interested in just, trying something a little off the beaten path, I say give this deck a shot. Most of the cards in it, other than Millenniummon and Piedmon, are pretty cheap. And I think that if you play it, you'll see what I'm talking about. You'll have a great time. And it is going to be super cool. So, with all of that being said, this has been Matt Ishida's DigiDestiny fulfilled.